This morning, vastly different reactions to the framework for a historic nuclear agreement with Iran. World leaders have until the end of June to make it all final, and there's a lot of work to do up until then. The deal calls for Iran, among other things, to reduce its centrifuges by 2/3 to about 6,000 and cut its enriched uranium stockpile to about 3%. In return, sanctions against Iran will be lifted. Iran's president has said a short time ago his country will stick to its promises and hopes to become a more active player in world affairs. But the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he said the deal threatens Israel's existence. He said this: such a deal does not block Iran's path to the bomb. Such a deal paves Iran's path to the bomb. Secretary of State John Kerry helped hammer out the agreement. He writes this in an opinion piece in the Boston Globe today. To be clear, according to the secretary, there is no aspect of this agreement that is based on promises or trust. Every element is subject to proof. Only if Iran lives up to its obligations as verified by the IAEA and by our own eyes and ears will it receive the relief from sanctions that it needs to end its economic isolation. President Obama is warning Congress not to do anything to sabotage the agreement. Lawmakers, many of them skeptical, they want to say on any final deal. Let's get reaction. The man that matters in this discussion, Congressman Ed Royce. He's a Republican chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, Mr. Chairman, it's great to see you. I've been seeing some reporting coming from the White House that the president, since this has all been announced, the president as well as his top advisors, they've been reaching out to members of Congress to brief further on this deal. Have you gotten a call?
Kate, I have had long discussions with the administration recently, yesterday, on aspects of this arrangement, and I'll just share with you the key concern that I raised, and that is with the North Korean nuclear framework deal in '94, what we found out is that we didn't have unfettered inspections. We didn't have the right to have our inspectors go anytime, any place, anywhere. And, you know, as a consequence of that, North Korea developed that nuclear weapon. And North Korea has been in touch with Iran, been working with Iran. We want to make certain that this time the inspectors really have the ability to access not just the sites that are named, but other military sites where they can show up and investigate. We don't have a repeat of what we had with North Korea developing a nuclear weapon.
What kind of I don't know, assurance or confidence were you given that that's going to happen? Because we heard from the president yesterday, and he said pretty clearly that inspections are going to be able to happen anywhere in the country. And Secretary Kerry, as you heard me read, they said that none of this is going to be based on trust. It's all going to be based on proof.
But that's not the view that the Iranians have. The view that the Iranians have is that their military installations are off limits. So I'll give you a real-world example. In '93, Iran signed on to the additional protocol, which meant that IAEA inspectors could go on site. But at Fordo, they built their own new contraptions of centrifuges for a separate nuclear research program, and said, well, this is a military site. You can't go on that site. This was discovered 2 years later, and a year after that, Iran admitted they had cheated. So they've cheated in the past. The question is, this time, unlike last time, will we have something stronger than the additional protocol? Will we have language that allows the inspectors to show up, you know, at the gate and say, look, we think that there's research going on inside that military facility, which is what Fordo was. And the military here has a lot to say about this. Not necessarily the Iranian negotiators. They don't have all the power in this. The Ayatollah and the military have the power. And so far, what we've found is that we haven't gotten language that satisfies those of us that have looked at this seriously, nor has the IAEA had those 12 questions answered about the previous bomb work. They've got 1,000 pages where they were developing a warhead for a nuclear device. And they say, we haven't gotten these questions answered. So these questions have to be answered. And this is what Congress is saying in the negotiation. Look, you can't get rolled on every single point here. You've got to get the inspectors in there. Go beyond the issue of inspections. In general, when you're looking at this, is there anything you like in the deal that you've been briefed on? Well, if we end up with the spent fuel going outside of the country, which I think is highly questionable, but if it went to be reprocessed, if that's where this stockpile ends up overseas, then I'll be happy. I don't know that that will end up in the negotiation, but I think it's still on the table, and we're still pushing for it. I think that the question of lifting sanctions, what the Iranians are saying is that their understanding of this negotiation is that sanctions by Europe and the United States are lifted immediately. We need verification in this. This can't be like North Korea, where everybody goes around and congratulates themselves that we've found peace in our time, and then we find out down the road that because we didn't nail it down properly, the North Koreans have developed a nuclear weapon and an ICBM capability. Well, especially when the Ayatollah, let me just point this out, the Ayatollah said last week, yes, death to America, he says to the crowd that are chanting this. When you have this type of attitude, it better be verified that you can get the inspectors in there.
Well, at the very least, I can tell you right now, it seems very clear that the president and his advisors, they've got a lot more convincing to get you on board with what they have as a framework right now. Congressman Ed Royce, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your time. Looking forward to having more conversations with you about this.
Thank you, Kate.
Of course. Ahead for us at this hour, chaos in Yemen. Even with airstrikes and threats of ground troops, rebel forces continuing their push. Has all hope been lost in what now seems very like a failed state? Much more on that next.
You know that little voice? The one that wakes you up at 2 a.m.? It's right. You are dying. Going the way of the dodo, the dinosaurs. It's your heart, not the one in your chest, the one in your business. Your HR and finance systems? They can't keep up. They rob you of your ability to make decisions because they are based on technologies from the 80s that have been patched and upgraded beyond reason. They are atrophied, calcified. Your heart has stopped beating. Put simply, if you were going to create a system today, you would build it to grow with your business, to be mobile, to work in the cloud and deliver data from which decisions can actually be made.